we filed a lawsuit today at the Court of Claims, and we are asking the Court of Claims to issue a temporary restraining order against the Detroit public school system so that we can get the summer school shut down. Right now, there are students in Detroit who are being asked to go to school under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. Detroit already has gone through a phase of thousands of people dying from COVID-19. And without any preparation and without sufficient amount of supplies, without any kind of training for teachers or students or bus drivers, you name it, DPS decided to open up again. We are asking for this temporary restraining order because we want to save the lives of the young people of Detroit. There is not a school district, major school district in this country that has reopened to do a mass summer school like DPS is. Everyone knows it's too dangerous. Governor Whitmer said a few days ago that she was concerned about opening schools in September, but here DPS is open now. Well, you know what? Detroit's been used as a kind of Tuskegee experiment for far too long, and we can't let it happen now. We're not the guinea pigs. We're not the people that are asked to send our children to unsafe, unprepared schools so that Governor Whitmer and Mike Duggan and whoever else can decide, see how that works, and then decide what to do in the fall. These schools need to be shut down now. They are a public health danger. Final point, the CDC has said that the worst thing that you can do, the single event that you can go into with things opening up again that would cause the greatest spread of the virus is doing a full-scale opening of a school district that has multiple schools. Okay, some part of DPS is closed, but 26 schools are open now. And that means that there's students in those schools who are being exposed to the virus to take home to their grandparents and their parents. There are teachers in that school who are exposed to the virus to take home to their sons and daughters and neighbors. No, this needs to come to a halt now. We are hoping that the Court of Claims will issue a temporary restraining order in the next day or two so we can finally bring this health disaster, this pogrom of Detroit, to a close. That's it.
Thank you, Shanta. Are you, do you want me to open it up for questions from the people?
Sure. I mean, if anybody else wants to speak, that's fine.
Ben is on. Ben, I think you can unmute if you want to speak.
No, I'm just going to say, obviously, I very much agree with Shanta's statement. It's just fundamentally reprehensible and outrageous that Detroit students are being used in this way as a new Tuskegee experiment. We've got to shut that down now. I'm not one to just sit back and allow this to happen. I do want to see my students again. I would love to be back in the classroom, but the reality is it's just not safe. It is too dangerous. Once we deal with the pandemic, once that virus is contained, then that's the time to start talking about how to open back up. But right now, there is just no rational reason to expose students to this danger and to expose our communities and our city to this danger. The schools will become a breeding ground, and clusters of infection will develop there. These students are going to take them home. It's just a matter of time. We've got to shut it down now.
Nicole, shall we open up for questions?
Sorry, yes, we can go ahead and open up for questions. Anyone who has a question, you can unmute yourself, I believe, and ask. If that's not working, please send me a message in the chat and I will click to unmute you.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me. Dave Spencer with Fox 2 News here. Can you hear me?
I can,
Yeah, we
thank you
can hear
so
you.
much.
Okay, yeah, I have a question. I was just wondering where we are in the filing process. Unfortunately, I missed the very beginning of the news conference. If you could kind of just reiterate where we stand procedurally in the process. Thank you.
So the suit is fully filed in Lansing right now. We know that we've got Judge Cynthia Stevens to be the judge presiding over these proceedings. Excuse me. And so all we're doing now is waiting to see what her decision is. Does she want to impose a temporary restraining order and then call a hearing to make a determination as to whether or not that TRO should continue? And so that's where we are. We can send everybody, you know, if anybody gets their information to Nicole, we can send everybody the filings, what we put in today. I think people will find them very compelling. There are a number of affidavits from students and parents and teachers that are really, really good. Khalil,
Yes, ma'am. This is
please
Khalil
go
from
ahead.
MI. I'm sorry?
No, I'm sorry. I said, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks. Just wanted to ask, I know there were some protests earlier this week. I think they shut down the buses and stuff. Is that expected to continue, or are we just going the court route?
No, that's going to continue. And I think that's been really successful. Two of the people who joined our lawsuit are bus drivers who had no idea what was going on or what this assignment is, who had been given no instructions, no mask, no hand sanitizer, no one to help train them about how to do social distancing on a school bus. And once they knew what this was about, they quit right on the spot and have become a part of this lawsuit and public spokespersons in favor of what we're doing. I think that I think there are numbers that the district is putting out that are, to be blunt, false about how many students are going on a daily basis. We know from bus drivers who are still working that lots of buses are empty. We know from teachers that the district has stopped sending, at least to some schools, people in to do a head count. And so I don't think the numbers are true. Originally, DPS had signed up 2,000 students for in-school summer school. And on the first day, they said 500 students showed up. So I am so glad that we've done what we've done and that we began these protest actions, because it meant that 3/4 of the people who signed their children up for summer school decided immediately, right away, if it's not safe, they're not going. And we're talking about people whose children are going to have to fall back a year, aren't going to be able to finish the coursework they need to do to get a real high school graduation certificate. But as being perfectly rational human beings, life means more than a piece of paper.
Mhm.
So yes, we'll be out there.
Hi, Dave Spencer again. My question is, Dr. Vitti said yesterday during the school board meeting that he cannot see the school year going forward fully online without complete funding from the state. Is there any reaction to that? Is there any path that you see going forward with a full online curriculum?
You know, I think that we'll have to gauge where we're at in the fall. But if Superintendent Vitti is saying that, then I suppose what he's thinking is his best way of proving to the legislature, who has been historically hostile to Detroit, to give up some money, is to have this summer school go on, have some casualties, and maybe that would persuade them to do what needs to be done to go fully online. If that's what this is all about, it is completely cynical, absolutely unacceptable. This is a pandemic. And it's not business as usual. And it's not going to go back to business as usual for a really long time. Nobody wants to live in a society where children can't go to school, where they can't play with each other, where they can't gain from the social interactions they have. No teacher wants to be sitting at home trying to teach remotely when they've been taught and they feel really experienced and good at teaching in a classroom. Yeah, it's all upside down. But until the virus ends, we have to be in a position to be able to save the lives of the people of Detroit, and first and foremost, to protect our children.
I have a question for Ben. Ben, I was on that call yesterday when we heard from roughly, I don't know, 40 or so people speaking in opposition to summer school to the board. How do you think your message was portrayed, and how do you think it was received?
To me, the important message right now is just that it's just too dangerous. And I think, as I agree with what Shanta was saying, that I think it has been received by a great number of parents in the city. I think that's why enrollment is much lower than was projected. So I do think we're getting across to a lot of parents and students in the city about the dangerous situation, and I do think that's getting through to people. So I'm actually quite pleased with that. I think there's some more work to do, because any classroom that's open now is still a danger to the students in the classroom as well as to the communities that they return home to. Oh, Shanta, you're muted if you're saying something.
All right. No, I just wanted to say one thing, which is that every single day, there are people who are involved in the process of trying to reopen the schools, trying to get the buses going, trying to be chaperones for students, that are showing their willingness to try to help in our undertaking. Some of them cannot lose their jobs. They're scared for that. But whatever steps they can take that can make it impossible for the buses to go out, or for the buses to get there on time, for the buses to come back empty, they're trying to do their part. And that's a great thing. Detroit is a strong and tough city. And I don't think there are too many people in Detroit who have forgotten the state takeovers of the Detroit schools, who've seen how cynical Lansing has been, how racist Lansing has been to the people of Detroit. And so they don't have much reason to believe in what's going on now. Governor Whitmer has issued more than 140 executive orders, and some of them are about nail salons and, July the 4th parties and all kinds of different things. But she knows what's happening now in Detroit, and it's on her to issue another emergency executive order saying we're not ready to open up schools in Michigan now. Summer schools they need to be shut down.
To that end, Shanta, have you reached out to the governor's office and gotten any response back from them in that regard?
Well, the lawsuit is a way, I guess, of reaching out to them. So they definitely have gotten that information. We've tried to reach the appropriate people there. It's a little bit difficult to figure out, how to do that, but they're in a know now. But I can't imagine why she doesn't know, though. I mean, she can act without talking to us, and she has to know what's going on. That this is the emergency situation she declared when they were just 2 cases, which was great. 2 COVID cases in Michigan, and she shut down the state. That was great. That was a great thing to do, because it saw some prescience about what was coming. Well, she spent the last period of her life trying to figure out how to keep Michigan safe. She needs to keep Detroit safe. We are just, to do anything else is just an act of racism. It's an act against the people of Detroit, and no one will forget. There are a lot of teachers and parents who are asking us now, when can we go up to Lansing and picket? Because they know that this is wrong. And she does too.
I apologize, I'm late to this meeting, so this may have been covered earlier, but the district and Dr. Vitti in particular seem to be pressing this point that, hey, summer school is voluntary for both the students and the staffers. Can you press that point?
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's voluntary in the following sense for everybody. There are people who are being told, and some of them are represented in our lawsuits, that they won't be able to matriculate to the next grade unless they go to summer school. And so, yeah, they signed up, and you could call that voluntary, but it's not exactly voluntary. If your choices are, you know, that you're going to be set back a grade, there are principals that have called students and told them, look, if you want to get a real diploma, you better come back this summer because this is the time to do it. Well, that's not exactly voluntary either. So I don't think that the majority of people who signed up for summer school did so because they wanted to be in collective learning situations again. I think the people who signed up for summer school in their great majority are parents for younger students and students themselves who fear that they will be cut off from the future that they've been dreaming of and fighting for so long. But you have to be alive to have that future. And it's Superintendent Vitti's, it's absolutely his duty to shut down these schools. It's saying that they're voluntary. Who cares? Who cares? Honestly, in my opinion, if somebody volunteers their child to go to summer school under these conditions, then something is very, very wrong with them. But that doesn't give the district the right to hide behind that fault or ignorance of a parent to do the dirty deed, to create another spike in Detroit, to advance the pandemic in this state, to make Detroit the experimental hub of what the next phase of COVID-19 will look like and what will happen if schools reopen. No, it needs to stop. It needs to stop now. This has to be shut down. The people of Detroit have suffered enough. We've paid the price for years and years of racist mistreatment and forced impoverishment. Not this too. I've been a political activist for a really long time, really long time. And my whole experience as a political activist, I have never seen people put in place a conscious plan that they are saying is to help people that could cost people their lives and to do it with impunity. This, when you hear stuff like that, you think, God, is this Nazi Germany? Is this being in Russia under the Tsar when there were pogroms? No, this is Detroit, and Superintendent Vitti needs to go, and the program needs to be shut down.
And I would just add, in terms of whether or not we're calling it voluntary, is that how voluntary is it when it's being completely misrepresented? I mean, nobody in the district's materials, they're not explaining the risk of loss of life or permanent lung scarring or brain damage. They're not explaining any of these risks to families that are making this choice. That's not a voluntary decision when you're being deliberately lied to and misled.
I'm not trying to defend them, but they make the argument that students could choose to go to summer school online or in person, and these students have chosen to go in person. Is that a correct statement, or are they pressuring kids to go in person?
I think a lot of the students don't have access to computers, and in part, I think purely because of the virus, there was an attempt of DPS to get computers in students' hands, but that process failed for some students. And so this is the only choice they have. One of the affidavits in our case is that of somebody who volunteered to do online teaching and to do teaching in a building. And when he got to Mumford High School, he saw these students coming in, and they had been called by the principal. They had signed up to learn virtually, but the only way they could learn virtually was to be in the computer lab of that school. And that's not really a different choice. So I think that's not true.
I'd also like to add to that, this is Nicole. Sorry, I don't have my video. I know I've seen another, a parent on the news, one of the news shows, dropping her daughter off at Renaissance, saying she was very leery, didn't feel confident doing it, but she was told she needed to come to this bridge program for incoming ninth graders. And we know how competitive it is getting into Renaissance. So it might be called voluntary, but if you don't show up, that's your seat's going to the next person on the waiting list who does show up to Renaissance. So there is definitely pressure being put upon students and parents to bring them to some of these in-school programs. Another, I think it was an elementary student whose parents said, they said he's not going to, go on to the next grade if he doesn't come. So yeah, there definitely is pressure for people to come. And I just agree with Ben's point too. You can't, lie to people and tell them it's safe and come on in. And, and people would want to trust their school system and their school leaders that they are keeping their kids safe, but it's not happening.
Let me make an analogy. If the district knew that there were poisonous gas leaks in its building and it continued to teach students there, and it said, oh, we're not liable though, because it was voluntary. They had a choice. That would be absolutely unacceptable to anyone. And I think that there is this desire on people's part, which is really understandable, to feel like maybe it's safe, to listen to people who are saying it's safe, because it's been so disruptive and so hard on so many families. But that doesn't excuse DPS from their responsibility. They are in loco parentis. They are the parents when the parents are absent and the students are in those schools. And if this is how if these were their children, I don't think they'd be there. They need to treat them, they need to stop. There's no, what DPS is, okay, this is from what I can understand, and somebody can correct me, DPS is not saying these schools are safe. They're saying they're changing the subject. They're saying, oh, but the kids volunteered. They're saying, oh, but you had another choice. You could have learned virtually. That isn't the issue. There's one issue, that these schools aren't safe, and that no one can contend that there was any preparation that was done to make these schools safe and keep them safe and keep the children safe. So instead of changing the subject to something that is absolutely irrelevant, where there are these voluntary, Dr. Beatty said at one time, oh, I had to do this because parents were calling me and imploring me to do this. No, you still can't do it. You just can't do it. You have an obligation, and you have an obligation to make Detroit schools safe. The children of Flint knows what happens when government refuses to act on knowledge and to blame the people after they've done the dirty deed for what happened. That should not be Detroit.
Can I add on to that point real quick? Nicole, I'm a teacher also. The idea that it's about individual choices, it's not about, what individual people want. It's about protecting the entire community. Like Shanta was saying in the beginning, every student and teacher and staff person that's going to school, if they're exposed, they go back home to their families, their families go to work or wherever they go. And it's So part of, shutting the schools down is not just protect only the teachers and students inside the building. It's really about protecting the entire community, because schools are such an important vector in the spread of viral diseases. That's why we require students to have vaccinations when they come to school. So in the middle of the worst global pandemic we've seen in over 100 years, with no vaccine, there's no way that school should be open right now until we have a viable vaccine and have this pandemic under control. And for Dr. Vita to be suggesting we can do that is just completely unacceptable, and it really is time for him to go. Our school board, after the anger they heard from the people of Detroit last night, should be demanding his resignation immediately or removing him themselves. Any
Just
Go ahead.
Sorry, John Wisely at the Free Press again. Just kind of a procedural question, and I don't know the reasoning behind it, but Ben, I know your role as an executive board member at DFT, but it doesn't appear that the DFT as a union is a plaintiff in this lawsuit. Am I reading that correctly? And if I am, why is that?
You were asking Ben. Go ahead.
Are you asking me? Quite frankly, and this is not just my local. This is, I think, the positions that a lot of the unions have taken have been very weak positions on this. And in reality, union leaderships across the board have been finding ways to enable exposing people to the dangers of this virus. And what we're trying to do is put a stop to that. And yes, I do represent members of the Detroit Federation of Teachers. I was elected to this position by members. I hear a lot from DFT members expressing their concern about schools reopening and their absolute terror that they may be required to go back to work in the fall. So that's the kind of, I guess, the long and short of it.
I think the DFT is also bound by a letter of agreement right now that was signed between the union and the district. I mean, we would welcome the DFT at any time to join this lawsuit. It would certainly make it stronger, but I think it's got to be a concern of the unions that they not end up in another lawsuit for not bargaining in good faith, for not following the terms of the letter of understanding they signed.
Thank you.
Are there more questions or anything else that people want to ask or say?
Just procedurally, do you know when you might expect a decision on the TRO?
Well, you know, I think everything went to the judge this afternoon, if not before that, when we checked in at about noon. The judge had already been assigned. We assumed that the judge had gotten the papers. We've certainly been able to serve some of the defendants in the case, but this is an ex parte suit. So my guess is that if Judge Stevens believes what is being said in those affidavits, then she'll issue the TRO and then schedule something in which the district could argue otherwise.
Thank you. Could you also just keep us apprised, assuming, you know, if you do get a TRO, could you get that out to us quickly? Because it's hard for us sometimes to get info out of the Court of Claims in a timely fashion.
Absolutely, absolutely. The Court of Claims is like, you know, it's like the last medieval court, I think, kind of in its functioning, that there's always one court like that in every state, and this one seems to be that. So I have great sympathy for you.
Thank you.
Okay, Well, thank you, everybody. I apologize again for the confusion around the press conference. We will make sure that that does not happen again and that things are clearer in our press release, that we are clearer in our press releases in the future, and we'll disseminate new material as it comes in, and Nicole can provide people with copies of the lawsuit if anybody wants it. Okay, thank you, everyone.